Hi, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Wright Experience. I'm Dr. William Wright Jr., the founder and host of this show. Tonight, I have an amazing guest with me who I've known for the past several years. She does some amazing work to help all of us school district folks get better. And tonight, I'm proud to have some time to share with her, and we're going to learn more about the amazing work that she does to help classrooms all across the United States get better every single day. My guest is Dr. Amanda Patterson. Dr. Amanda Patterson began her career as a teacher in DeKalb County, Georgia, public schools. During her tenure, she served as school leadership in several leadership and administrative capacities, both in the building and in the district office. She also served as vice chairperson on several school visits for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, SACS, and for the Council on Accreditation and School Improvement called CASE, the school accreditation agency that CASE was. In addition to her K-12 education and training experiences, she worked for 2 years as an adjunct professor at Mercer University in the Atlanta area, teaching aspiring teachers to effectively teach reading in the classroom and guiding best practices in research. Amanda focuses her efforts on supporting districts as they work towards training and measuring of their teams, providing leadership to foster systemic transformation, to achieve school improvement, evaluating curriculum and program development, in addition to identifying needs for professional development training for administrators, as well as analyzing data and assessments. Her passion continues to be in academic instruction, all while developing relationships with school districts and the communities they serve. Amanda is now entering her 30th year in public education and has led the opportunity to work in 42 of the 50 states across the country, as well as internationally. She is known for her unique skill in relating to others and has a proven track record in defining and providing innovative programs and solutions for children, teachers, and leaders in all settings. She is skilled at fostering collaboration between leaders and representatives from school districts, as well as with state and federal stakeholders. Amanda has extensive experience in systemic school reform implementation, advanced knowledge in the disaggregation and use of data to achieve desired results, and how to use instructionally sound practices to accomplish significant school improvement. Currently, Amanda is the Senior National Director of Academic Planning and Analytics at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And in her spare time, she and her husband love to spend time traveling for pleasure and following the frequent losses of the Atlanta Falcons on the road and the many wins of the University of Georgia Bulldogs. How about that? As a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I hope to add to those losses of the Atlanta Falcons. Just kidding. Welcome to the Right Experience, Dr. Patterson.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. I am excited about this. You certainly, I think your bio is spot on. You certainly have done some amazing work to help us see ourselves better as academic leaders and try to use data to drive improvements. And so I'm interested in talking to you about that work tonight. So, Dr. Patterson, if you'll start out just giving us an overview of the work that you do to help school districts get better. Just talk to us about the work that you do.
I think my biggest passion, as you mentioned, was really collaborating with school districts. And even though I'm entering my 30th year, I still learn from those school districts across the country each time I go and I visit and I work with them. And so primarily my role is to help districts. I say I come in to be a disruptor. I want you to really think about what's working and not what's working. Allow an outside party to have a third party lens to say, are you really getting what you want? Is your
Mhm.
return on investment what you thought it would be? And so often you find that we are close to what we're doing, that oftentimes we miss the mark, and we miss the mark because we're too close to it. And so being a disruptor, so to speak, I ask those tough questions that when I'm gone, that you can really reflect and say, did we really get what we want out of it? One of, I think, the strengths around the work that I do is working from not necessarily from the top down, but collaboratively. I love to spend time with district offices and then at that principal level, because what we uncover most of the time is there's a huge disconnect from what the district expects and from what's actually occurring. And so when we're doing data analysis, line item analysis, it doesn't matter what data set you have, whether you have NWEA, whether you have iReady, whether you have Renaissance Star, or whether you have an HMH product. Because the work that I'm doing is agnostic, I can really take it and give you a big picture of it, put it beside your data, say for the last 3 or 5 years. And if it's flat and if it's static and you're not growing, help you really come to a position to say, what might we need to change? What might we need to add? Or what might we take away? And so that's primarily what I consider myself, as a subjective disruptor, and helping you really think through your return on investments.
So when I'm sitting in one of those disruptions, as I have, talk to us about what things are you looking at? Help the viewers understand what specifically are you looking at?
That's a great question. It's intimidating, I think, in the beginning, until people really get to
You're
know
kidding.
that that I'm sincere and honest at the work that I do, right? Because
Sure.
I've sat in the shoes, except for superintendency, I've sat in the shoes of those chief academic officers and those principals and assistant principals, right? And so I know what it means to strategically have to have a strategic plan, and you need to give it to 100 different buildings, and you've got 2,000 teachers that really need to implement it. So the first thing that I'm looking for is I'm listening to the conversation that's happening around me. How engaged, what is the academic language like amongst the superintendent, the board members, the district office cabinet members, even at the school level? I'm listening to hear what what is being said that resonates. Are we having a conversation about academics, or are we having a conversation about reading or math? There's a distinct difference. Are we having a conversation about academics in proficiency, or are we having an academic conversation about growth? So that's the first thing that I'm listening for.
And surely, this is a bit facetious, but surely educators and board members and leaders are not having conversations that are not academically focused now. Surely. That's a rhetorical statement, I guess. But sometimes we do need those reminders of what the business is supposed to be about. So thank you for that. That's amazing. So everybody is talking about pandemic recovery and what we're going to do to get students caught up and so forth and so on. And then I ran across this amazing article written by someone who's on the right side of the screen. And it's called "Don't Call It Learning Loss, but Recover, Reconnect, Reimagine." Did I get that right?
You did. You got it right.
So tell us about that.
And so during the time of COVID, it was a time where everybody across the country was grounded, so to speak. Right. And we are accustomed to the pendulums of education swinging. But in 2020, there was no way that any teacher, parent, no one could have predicted what it meant to live through a pandemic, let alone be an educator at such a time as this. And so one of the ways, I was talking to a superintendent in North Carolina, and we were talking about, okay, how will we pivot, if you will, to academics in an environment that had to be 100% digital, and his district was not one-to-one. And that's another conversation that we can have later. What did it really mean to be one-to-one? If students had access to laptops in the classroom, but they didn't take them home, you just had a class set, that was not one-to-one. So that became revealing for many. But in this particular district, they immediately and quickly were able to purchase devices. They did not have problems with Wi-Fi, unlike some of my districts. Even though they had devices, they still had Wi-Fi issues. So what did that mean? We're in a situation, teachers never went to any preparatory schools to learn how to teach in a pandemic. I did not.
That's right.
We did not learn how to be leaders. You did not learn how to be a superintendent in a pandemic. And so the first thing that superintendent said to me was, Amanda, we're talking about the social emotional well-being of our students, but I have to pivot and think about the social emotional well-being of my teachers.
That's right.
So the very first thing I said, okay, give me a day, give me 24 hours, and I'll come up with a strategy that I think will work for you. And the first strategy for teaching during a pandemic was, we need to tier our teachers. We often talk about tiering students, but what I need you to do now is to tier your teachers. The first thing I need you to do is to identify all of those teachers who are really digitally strong. And that really did separate some of us who were veteran teachers that had been teaching 20 for 30 years, because I can admit I have reached my technological max. I don't want to learn how to do anything else. But we have teachers who were embracing it, who loved it. So these were the teachers who immediately were going to teach other teachers. They stood out for their strengths. And another thing that I suggested to him was, we need to ask our teachers specifically, what do you need to be better in this environment? Mm-hmm. It was not as much about the children, because the children would be fine. We could assign them material to work on. Children know how to be resilient. It is oftentimes the adults that suffer the most from challenges and change, because we're accustomed to a ritual and a routine. And when that routine is disrupted, how do we first deal with that, let alone embracing the 100 children that you have to teach daily? Mm-hmm. So first, let's tier the teachers, identify their strengths, and those are the teachers we'll put first that may be teaching all of the classes. The second thing is to ask teachers, what do you need in this environment? And even in the teacher environment, some of our teachers needed laptops. Some districts gave teachers laptops, but they didn't leave the building. So now you've got to give teachers laptops. Now you've got to give teachers Wi-Fi. We underestimated that just because you were a teacher, you had Wi-Fi at home. So we had to do that. Third piece of that was the planning. In order to make your children successful, we got to back up. It's not about the kids. We got to set the teachers up for success, so then they can be great and good for their students. And so once we did that in that particular North Carolina district, we really saw that students began to thrive. Teachers didn't feel as overwhelmed. Were they overwhelmed? Yes, many of us were overwhelmed, but we had to manage it in such a way that we've got to solve one problem before we can fix another. And that was one of the ways that we talked about our pandemic experience around being an educator.
It's amazing that you had those experiences. One of them in your second point there, where you were talking about the teachers and getting them prepared and tiering them. Mm-hmm. I was shocked too. I was in a rural North Carolina district at the time the pandemic hit, and we're surveying, trying to figure out what the capabilities are for students, in terms of what they had. And when I learned, I had teachers who worked every day that didn't have internet access. I just wasn't prepared for that one. And we worked and solved those problems and got people what they needed, but I don't know that I was quite thinking in that direction. So. That's why we need help, and leaders need to be smart enough to figure out who can help them and give them the opportunity to do so. So thank you for that work. I appreciate that. Now, you've done some other writing too, some other publications, some other writing. So talk to us about those too.
So I think we traditionally focus on students, right? But again, sure, that COVID component was a place where I realized we really needed to pivot and think about teachers. But what is the role of a teacher? The role of a teacher really is to facilitate learning. The teacher is not necessarily the master, but should be the one who facilitates, guides, and encourages us. And so when you want a teacher to encourage learning, I think teachers need to be intentional. That's the first first piece of it, right? And how are you intentional? You have to establish rituals and routines. And so again, even before COVID happened, how do you manage a classroom setting? It's really not about yelling. And I say this genuinely. During my time as a teacher, during my time as a building administrator, I had the pleasure of opening a building in 1999. I never yelled at a child. I never had to raise my voice. I did the opposite of that. I was the same every day. And if I walked into a classroom and I saw something I didn't like, or I was the teacher, I was quiet. And that was different because young people expect you to yell and to get out of the box, as they say. I did the opposite. And so the kids were like, what is wrong with her? Because she's not saying anything. I was intentional in my approach. And so I would encourage, as we think about students, being very intentional in the strategic approach to how they learn. It is so true that the different modalities are there. And once teachers understand that, but more importantly, once students understand metacognition, it's important that we teach kids to say what you need to learn. Miss Patterson, I need, will you show me? This is the way I understand it. Will you repeat it for me in that way? And so I've written an article to talk about the rituals and routines of a classroom that make them really successful. And intentionality has always, I would say for the last 10 years, William, been a part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. Another part of that conversation is structured classroom plans, be it for the teacher and for the students. Students like structure. Believe it or not, they want someone to tell me, do this, do this, do this. Do this now, wait 5 minutes and do this.
Even today's child.
Even more so today, we've discovered. Right. And those teachers, like when I first started, I did a presentation at Virginia ASCD yesterday, and we talked about the before and the now. When I was in the building, I could never buy enough Xerox paper. My teachers would want Xerox paper, and I couldn't buy enough of it. But today's teacher doesn't need Xerox paper. They want software. They want new computers. They want all this technology, right? They want ring lights. I'm like, why do you need a ring light, for the love of God? But these are the things that they want now, right? And so that structure is what makes teachers and students thrive and do better. And being, again, intentional about that structure so that it doesn't change. And I can't say this enough. Being mindful and respectful of your community and of the needs of your students. Again, students are struggling today in ways that I'm not accustomed to. Sure. And so listening sometimes you have to adjust. Sometimes you just have to hold on, allow children to say what they need to say, be it over to the side, whisper in your ear, go to the counselor, but allowing children to have their say, to get whatever they have off their chest is just like a teacher who has a very rough day. My first day of school, the very first day I taught, I had a wreck on my way to work. It was raining. So when I got to school, that excitement level that I had wasn't there because I was stressed out about the person I slid into in the back, the person that hit me in the back, and insurance. So you need to be mindful about the situation and the thought process of where your teachers and your students and even your community is, right? Parents are very vocal. Parents show up now in good spaces and sometimes challenging spaces, but making everybody feel as though their thoughts, their mindset is valid and wanted, their perception is their reality, making everybody be intentional again. I can't say that enough, but being mindful about the space from which they come. Okay. And so beautiful. That's just where we have to be in the world today. Education, William, is just not what it was 30 years ago. That's right. In order for us to be successful administrators and superintendents as yourself, we have to adjust.
Yeah. Having that flexibility, and then conceptually, so it looked like I might have been on the right page. I've always called that immersing yourself in the community you serve.
Yes.
And that requires flexibility, particularly now because our communities are changing. And if we're not cognizant enough to understand where we're serving and how we're serving, and be willing to adapt, as you said, that's so key. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So let's say there's people out there listening to us that might be interested at some point in making the switch. I guess it would be a switch or an addition maybe to, because your career started in the K-12 classroom, and now you're working in corporate America, so to speak. So what is that transition like, and what advice would you give to someone that's interested in doing that?
Great question. I would say probably one of the things that I didn't realize at the time that I had, and I didn't know I had, was having a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I had mentors. My first one, of course, was Dr. Bill Hammond. He's no longer with us. He referred to himself as my professional father. And my one of my principals was Dr. Deborah Reeves, and she's still around, and I still talk with her often, frequently. Mm-hmm. When I say have a mentor, find someone that you admire. When I was a teacher in K-12 in DeKalb schools, our professional learning director at that time was Dr. Marcia Tate. And I remember, as all teachers, having to go to your district-wide professional development. And Dr. Tate at that time did something about my dendrites on brains, or do dendrites grow on brains? I don't know. It was something, but whatever it was extremely profound to me. And I remember saying at 21 years old, when I grow up, I want to be Marcia Tate. Mm-hmm. So the first, I think, advice, of course, is find a mentor. And number two, manifest and say out loud what you want to be. Okay. And number three is to work towards achieving that every day. And so in saying that, and I have no problems, I share this story frequently. Dr. Hammond, I've been a teacher for maybe 4 years now. And at that particular time, the International Reading Association was IRA. And he said, you're going to present. And it was me and 2 other of my colleagues. We did a terrible job, William. It was the worst thing I had ever done. My notes, I was nervous, I was embarrassed, and I said, I will never do this again.
Wow.
He said, yes, you will. I was like, nope, not going to do it. And he said, you will. And I've signed you up to do another IRA event. Okay, this time I'm going to do it by myself. Well, that's worse, because now I don't have my friends to help support me if I mess up. They can't back me up. I said, okay, when is it? He said, it's IRA, but it's going to be in Toronto, Canada. And I said, okay, I'm assuming, like the first one, it was regional. And that meant breakout sessions and everybody would come, small groups, but it was quite the opposite. I arrive, and it's the keynote, the beginning opening session, and there were almost 2,000 people there.
Oh, wow. All right.
And the only thing he said to me was, be you. And I said, okay. I said a little prayer before I walked on stage. I remembered Marcia Tate. I remembered what he said. And that was the first time that I actually spoke to 2,000 people at an international convention. And they actually stopped and wanted to take pictures with me and talk to me. And I was like, well, I'm a man. Wait, that's not me. But I said all of that to say is that while you have a mentor, while you have someone that you want to imagine yourself to be like, and you say it out loud and you manifest it, find as many opportunities to do what you think you want to do. And as a classroom teacher, I would advise you to present at conferences. If you are a building administrator at the district offices, join associations such as the National Association of Black School Educators. Become a member of AASA, the Aspiring Superintendents Academy, whatever it may be. You find opportunities to surround yourself and put yourself in places and positions where you can do what you think you want to do. And then when the time arises, if you so desire to work corporately, you can. I'll brag on a former superintendent of mine, Dr. Lewis. I came to corporate side of it, William, as you mentioned, because at the time I was in the assessment office. And Dr. Lewis had worked with a private company, and we were doing a program. I think he'd given them like $8 million. And he said, I need you to be the person to monitor my program. And I said, well, they already have a person that's going to monitor the program. And he said, well, I can't have the fox guarding the hen house. I need somebody internally that's going to make sure that the district's $8 million is being spent the way we said. At the middle of that project, before it was over, that company offered me a job to come and work for them. I was floored. Again, I had been teaching professional development for 10 years now. I had followed in Marsha's footsteps. I was able to speak at conferences. But when the opportunity came, my superintendent said, if you want to go, I want you to go. But if you ever want to come home, know that you can.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because of that support and that mentorship that I was able to stretch my wings out, if you will. And I haven't looked back since. It's been 12 years.
Wow. And I think that's amazing advice and interesting insight for leaders all across, whether I'm making a switch to corporate,
Mhm.
whether I am in K-12 and plan to stay in K-12, or whether I'm a leader in banking and industry. Make sure that you find some people that you could trust. And
Yes.
mentorship also means that sometimes, um, as I said to somebody not too long ago, sometimes you get mentored and sometimes you get torn by the mentor, and that helps you grow. So you want
Yes.
people that'll be honest with you and
Yes.
challenge you and push you and motivate you to be better. So thank you for that as well. So the future of education, we got a lot of stuff going on in education right now, and it seems to be changing faster than faster can be. Um, and I'll say this, so maybe you won't have to, or you might. Politics seems to be rearing its ugly head more and more in education these days. But what do you see as the future in K-12 education? What are we looking at in the future?
You're right. That's a tough one. Um, and I'll be honest, it hurts my heart.
Yeah.
I would think that in 2022, we're almost in 2023, we'd be much further ahead than we are. In many instances, we have regressed. There's a video that I'll send to you that you can share with your audience around equity and access.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that during COVID, there's still regions in this country that still don't have access to Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yeah.
Schools are shut down. They had computers, but simply because of where they live, not anything that the parents have done wrong, just based on where you live, rural, wherever, America, you didn't have fast band Wi-Fi. So access is not happening at a rate that is going to, I think, provide the equity and equality that's required. I think K-12 education today, we should not be struggling with equity and equality. And we are.
Yeah.
Things are not equal. All kids are still not getting what they need to be successful. And do more kids need more than others? Yes. Do some kids need less? Yes. But we have not, in my personal opinion, as a country, figured out a way to balance it in such a way that all kids feel validated and feel honored and feel respected, that they can have what they need to be successful. I know our educational system was created on a caste system, if you will, initially. And in the South, it was created. The reason we had summers out was because it was agrarian. But we're in 2022, and I don't know many students that are still having to go help in the fields to harvest. And so the fact that, again, we cannot make the shifts in all communities, not saying they have to be the same because every community is different, but the fact that we still can't make the shifts required for the individual communities to make them successful, it is stressful to me. I will say that, to say the least. And because I've traveled so much, both nationally and internationally, I cannot figure out why in some places is easy and in other places it's hard. So it's a challenge. And I do worry about the state of K-12 education in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
And that's because of the restraints that are being put on. We're oftentimes not allowed to, as you alluded to earlier, be creative and be flexible and really assess and then make changes to make things better. You cannot. Schools are never going to be like they were in 1950 and 1960, and most of that's a good thing. We don't want them to. We
Right?
don't want
We
them to
don't.
revert back to that.
We do not.
So I think that's right. And where I was, my previous district before I moved to where I am now during the pandemic, we learned 42%. So to back those numbers up, 42% of our households had either no or not adequate internet access. Isn't that something?
It's
In-
something.
in
And it's
2020.
2022. It's
Yeah,
2022.
yeah,
A
that's
cell
amazing.
phone does not count as adequate access.
Exactly, exactly.
But if you have a cell phone, we underestimated what that meant. And you might have one or two cell phones in a family where there were 4 kids. That's not enough.
We even had it was a great gesture, certainly we're thankful for, but we had some hotspots sent to us, and when tech director got them, said, hey, we got these hotspots, we'll be able to pass them out to families and so forth, and it should be a good thing. I said, well, hotspot ain't any good if you don't have internet access, internet
Right.
service, or
That's right.
you could go out of the town in 5 miles each direction and you'd lose
Yes.
all hope of internet service. So that hotspot didn't do much good. But anyway, hopefully we will. That's the next challenge. I agree with you. We need to work with folks and figure out how to get that that access, because learning is going to have to take place
Yes.
outside of the confines of school buildings in the future. Absolutely agree. Dr. Patterson, we've asked you a few questions here. Is there anything else that I have not covered that you would like to share with my audience?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of your podcast. I'm glad that the moon aligned itself, that it worked out this time. I'm excited. I am very, very excited about the work that you're doing. I'm so proud of you. I've watched you grow, and that's exciting too. And I think that your community and your school, your teachers, your students are the benefactors of what I believe are great things to come.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. I'll slip you a 10 later. To the Wright Experience audience, and Dr. Patterson, if you hold on with me for a minute, we'll come back and close out the show.
Okay.
To the Wright Experience audience, I just want to thank you once again, and I think you understand why I was so eager to get Dr. Patterson on the show. She is simply an amazing leader and does some great work for us, and is at the cutting edge of helping districts. And we're going to share some of her articles in follow up to the podcast. We'll do that through the Facebook Live page as well as the YouTube channel. I am thankful because we're fast approaching the 2-year anniversary of the Wright Experience. We have certainly been plugging along and growing, and we're getting more and more subscribers every day. And if you have not joined our Facebook, our YouTube and/or Facebook Live page, I welcome you to do so. Those of you that are benefiting from the show, please continue to help spread the word. We're excited about this work that we're doing and the opportunity to bring you some of the very best and amazing leaders that I can find. Next week will be no exception. We're going to be talking to a principal leader who is from the state of Texas. That'll be next week, December 8th, 7:00 p.m. on the Wright Experience, and look forward to having you be a part of that. Dr. Patterson, I want to thank you very much again for agreeing to do this. I know you have an amazingly busy schedule, flying here and talking there, and get a text message in every now and then. But I appreciate more than taking the opportunity to come on the show, be a part of it. And we're gonna have to get you back really, really soon.
Always. I would appreciate it. I'd love to come back.
All right. And to the Wright Experience audience, thank you and good evening.